I've started to realize that a lot of people in my generation are scared to live a simple life. Maybe this is just my perspective, but it seems like people, specifically in my generation, are scared to live that simple, working 9 to 5 job, maybe living in a house in a nice neighborhood, white picket fence, maybe a dog or cat or two, the kind of classic American dream kind of life. And whether you see this shift in generational changes or not, I find the need to break this down a little bit and kind of talk about it and dissect the reasoning behind why I'm seeing this today. I would like to see if there is an answer that we can find as we talk through this today because I don't really know if there will be an answer, but I want to see what we can come up with, you and I. Welcome to Find Your Power podcast. I am your host, Avery Jane. And in today's episode, I'm talking about why I think my generation specifically is afraid of living a simple life. What exactly a simple life is, and I'm kind of going to go through some pros on living a simple life, and we can really just dive into this topic because personally I can relate a little bit. I also want to touch on burnout and overworking a little bit because I think a lot of people my age and in my generation can relate to this concept. So, to start, I want to think about some reasonings on why this fear may exist of living a simple life specifically for my generation. And when I say my generation, I'm more specifically talking about Gen Z. This ranges from 1997 to 2012. People that were born in those years, also referred to as Zoomers. Fun fact. We are the generation that, grew up with smartphones and social media, maybe not until like middle school, high school age for some of you, but still, we were teenagers with TikTok, is the main idea. And I think that with this generation, there's a lot of fast-paced things. And also since the, life of the internet and social media has come about, I think that also influences maybe shorter attention spans and more fast-paced lifestyle. But of course, we can't blame everything on the internet and social media, although that probably is the answer to a lot of our generational problems and issues. But that's kind of a whole another episode talking about the problems and issues of social media. But I think that mainly some main reasons, aside from just blaming it all on social media, are reasons why the generation I'm in is fearing this kind of life and lifestyle is maybe because of cultural pressures and expectations. So I think part of this, has to do with hustle culture. According to the internet, hustle culture is a societal mindset that emphasizes relentless work and productivity as the primary means to achieve success. And it's often at the expense of personal well being, which I can see how that will be accurate. But kind of touching on the hustle culture and overworking, I think that in my generation, we find the need to do more. And we maybe have the mindset that living the simple, quote unquote, life of just the 9 to 5 job, having a family, and having a few pets, um, maybe doing vacations every once in a while, something very simple and normal, quote, this maybe isn't working hard enough. This is kind of having to do with the fear that that's not enough. I think there's a part of this generation that thinks that they need to be the answer, they need to solve all the problems, and that's a lot to put on people. I think we also have a fear of falling behind our peers, falling behind people in other generations, and not doing enough. And in this sense, we need to keep working harder, and we may feel like we just can't ever reach our highest potential because we always need to keep going harder, working harder, doing more, solving more problems, solving the problems of the world, even. But that shouldn't be our responsibility. Maybe part of that also has to do with the mindset of the world and the condition and the state that it's in right now. Maybe some people feel like they need to be the one to solve the problems of climate change, global warming, carbon emissions, landfills, all of that in between because this problem is dawning more and more on our generation, looking to our generation to solve the problem of the past ones, which I've seen a lot on TikTok and social media, people in my generation specifically saying that are these older generations causing these problems and expecting us to fix them. And part of that can partly be true as well because that pressure was then put onto us. And some of you listening might not worry at all about that, and this might not be a main concern of yours specifically, but I think that this could also contribute to this pressure on our generation, why we can't just live the simple life and live the normal life because we need to do more than that, and to contribute to solving the world problems. I think another part of this, touching back on social media, has to do with social media glamorizing productivity and hustle culture, like I mentioned before, because you see all these videos on TikTok, Instagram, all this over social media about people's accomplishments, people's achievements. And this is another part of my reasoning why I think this fear has come about is because people are tying their whole identity to the achievements that they accomplish. And part of that is probably due to social media because when you achieve something, you post it on social media. And you don't usually post on social media when you are feeling sad or do something wrong or make a mistake, right? So, of course, what we see are people's highlights. And our brain only knows that part of these people that we don't actually know. The parasocial relationships, if you've ever heard of that, it's kind of like just the people that you know on the internet and you don't know them in real life. And you might even feel like you have some kind of friendship with them just because you know them through online, like listening to this podcast, for example, or other podcasters, or YouTubers, or Instagram influencers. Either way, you have these parasocial relationships with these people, and usually you only see their best moments, their highlights, their achievements, and that may be what you think of them and how you see them, which then reflects onto yourself that you're not doing enough and you need to do more and you're not achieving as many things as they are. And how come you just had a bad day yesterday where you did nothing and it seems like they just solved all the world's problems? But the truth of it is that they're just posting the good things, and so are you most of the time. So, of course, it feels like these people are accomplishing way more than you, but at the end of the day, you're only seeing the best of them most of the time. And I think this also ties into how our generation only feels valuable when we're extraordinary. Like I mentioned before, these achievements that we can post. If you're just living the ordinary day to day life, maybe like I mentioned, a simple life, what do you have to post? Maybe it's not as much content, and therefore you feel like you're not as valuable as these people that are living chaotic, crazy lives, posting every little achievement that they make and every trip that they go on, where they're vacationing, all of that in between. And this can give kind of a discomfort when it comes to rest and stillness and just being ordinary because it feels like you can't match up to them. You're falling behind, like I said before. But you're in reality you're not falling behind, but your mind might convince you that you are. And I feel like the reason that this is specifically happening for my generation is because 50 to 100 years ago, there was no internet and social media, of course. And we couldn't see every single one of everyone's achievements that we wanted to see that they posted. People that lived across the country, across the world, we didn't know what they were doing. 200 years ago, people didn't know the achievements that these people were having or making. And with every single achievement and accomplishment and great thing in these people's lives being broadcasted to you every single day, it's bound to be toxic eventually and convince you that you're not doing enough. Or it's not okay to live a simple, ordinary life with no chaos, with no extraordinary achievement. And this kind of associates with the fact that choosing peace and comfort and just not always striving for the absolute most might also be seen as like settling or not being ambitious because of partly because of the internet, but also because maybe other generations kind of put that lens on us. I think at the end of the day, the reasons for this kind of fear and uncomfortable thought of living a simple life has to do with comparison, competition, and external validation. Um, Putting those three together because comparison can be extremely toxic, and it seems like it's getting easier and easier to compare yourself with others, of course, because of social media. The more that you see other people, the more that you can compare yourself to them. And it's not normal to have access to every single person's life and be able to see what everyone is doing via social media. This isn't really natural or normal in the way that we humans are supposed to exist. At least from my perspective, in the way that evolution occurred, our cavemen selves were not supposed to know every little detail of everyone else's lives in the world, or at least have access to it. Kind of comes back to this pressure to live this highlight reel kind of life. Because if you don't have content to post, then what kind of life are you even living? Are you even living at all? Is a lot of people's mindset, which is crazy. You shouldn't have to document everything on social media in order to prove that you are living a happy, comfortable life. And I think that that's kind of what it's come down to in my generation specifically. I think that the other generations, maybe your parents, my parents, grandparents, even with internet, social media that came out kind of before us, it still wasn't necessarily used to document every single piece of your life. I think in most cases, it didn't get as toxic as maybe it is now. And if you're not living a life that's so exciting to broadcast to the world, then you feel like maybe your life isn't exciting or isn't fun or isn't worthy, valuable, extraordinary. seeing everyone else's vacations, luxury things, all their friends, all their pets, all everything that they have, all their materialistic items, it really drowns out your own life, even when it's good, even when you're happy. But maybe you start to feel like you should be doing more, you should have more, should be achieving more. And all of these things that people are posting, especially the luxury lives, the crazy vacations every weekend, the multiple materialistic items, this starts to feel like the norm because this is what you're seeing. When in reality, it's not the norm at all. I think when I talk about the fact that we are afraid of living a simple life, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I don't think that we necessarily are afraid of just living a simple life. If you think about it on a surface level, maybe it doesn't seem scary. I think that we have to dive deeper and understand what we actually are afraid of. It's not necessarily the simple 9 to 5 job, family, nice house kind of life. I think there's a few other things that we are actually afraid of that are deeper into that. And some of those might be like the fear of missing out, FOMO, as many people call it, because if you are deciding to just live this simple life, then you aren't going to be doing all these fascinating, extraordinary things that other people might be doing, especially broadcasting. This might kind of make you feel like you're missing out on things in life because you have other responsibilities that these people don't have, maybe. And I think there's also kind of a fear of yourself and being quiet with yourself, as well as self reflection. I think another fear that we might have is the fear of falling behind. And I say this because if you're living this simple life, maybe you have this plan and these goals stretched out for you. Maybe that doesn't include some things that other people are doing. You feel like they're getting ahead because they're doing more than you. They're doing these extraordinary things. You could also have the fear that you might seem boring because if you're living a simple life, maybe that's not what people around you are doing or the people that you're seeing on social media are doing. And this kind of ties back to what I mentioned before with social media being full of just the highlights. Because if you don't have all of these extraordinary highlights in your life, then you may feel like you are living a boring life, even if you're not. I want to touch on some pros of living a simple life. So, some pros of living a simple life may be that you will be steady and organized. You will have an organized routine. This may lower your stress and anxiety because all of your routine is very in flow and there's nothing crazy spontaneous that should happen. Um, this also gives more clarity on your priorities and your goals because if you know exactly what career you want to go into, what 9 to 5 job maybe you want to have, then you can just work towards getting that. And that kind of makes it very clear on your goals and priorities that you have. Another pro could also be that you might have stronger relationships. This one is kind of iffy because it's hard to tell if you really would have stronger relationships in this kind of simpler life versus one that's more chaotic because you really don't know. And I think it really depends on the person at the end of the day for this one. But I think you could have stronger relationships because you are more grounded and maybe that gives you more opportunity to build these long lasting stronger relationships. That this could also give more free time, whether that's to do hobbies that you enjoy or maybe just spending time with your family because this kind of simpler life has that 9 to 5 job where hopefully you can be mentally out of the job when you are not there or not in work mode, if that makes sense. You will be financially in a situation that's less risky because you have a career, hopefully, that is more substantial and financially comfortable, maybe more job security is what I'm trying to say. Whether you'll be making more or less money is hard to tell. That just depends on the job that you have. But I think the financial situation itself could be considered less risky. If you're not living a simple life, then you're doing something outside of societal norms. And sometimes that can be congratulated, but of course, you could also feel judgment from that. Whereas if you are living that simple kind of 9 to 5 life, then you maybe could feel judgment that you went the safer quote unquote route. I think another pro of living a simple life, or I guess not living a chaotic or unconventional type of lifestyle, is that if you are living in this unconventional type of lifestyle, you may feel isolated or lonely. A lot of times, if you are branching out of something that's societal norms, then maybe you won't feel so supported a lot of times. Of course, that depends on who you are and the people that you are surrounded by. But I think that you're putting yourself in a more risky financial situation if you decide to go with the more unconventional type of route. And you may also lose friendships if you decide to, because some people may not support that type of lifestyle. You also have a higher risk of everything going away. It's a little less job secure. Some final takeaways on living an unconventional life versus a simple, kind of standard conventional life is that the slow life doesn't necessarily mean that you're falling behind, and it can be safe and comfortable and strategic for future outcomes to live a simple life. But at the same time, you may feel like you are missing out on a lot of things. And I think that's why my generation fears it. You may feel like you don't have as many things in your life to highlight or put out there on social media. But I think that something that my generation is realizing very slowly but surely is that social media shouldn't rule our lives as much as it is and much as it has begun to. I think you could also just kind of reflect on if you are scared of living that conventional lifestyle, why? Think about why you are. And maybe it's just not meant for you, and that's okay. I think it really depends on the person. And that's why I am doing this myself and talking about this right now, because I think I've noticed a lot of this in my life throughout people in my generation. Like a lot of you guys already know listening, I am in college and I see a lot of people at my college who are, of course, looking for that kind of conventional type of career or job title or life path, even. And then there's others that I feel are in college for that path, but maybe they're not looking for that type of conventional life or lifestyle. And I think it boils down to whether this is because of fear or because of actual desire. Maybe it's because people think that they can't make as much money if they're living that simple conventional life. But I think it's also important sometimes to kind of consider why you want money. And of course, I touched a lot of this on this in my past episode titled My Take on Money. But I think a lot of times people just think that they want to make the most amount of money and that's their goal. But it's really important to reflect on why that's actually important to you. What are you actually going to do with all of this money that you want to make? Do you want to just make money because you want to just be rich? Or do you actually have things in your mind that you want to be able to spend this money on? For example, you want to make a lot of money because you want to vacation a lot. You want to travel the world. And that's completely reasonable. But I think it's hard a lot of times when people just make their goal to make a lot of money and they're not really sure why they actually want all of that money. Maybe it's just more for the title. That might be another reason on why my generation is scared of this simple life because they feel they can't achieve the money goals or mindsets or travel that they want to if they live that simple, kind of conventional life. Anyways, I feel like I've been talking a while, but that kind of wraps up what I was going to touch on today. I really don't have an answer, but this is something to think about. And this is just something that I observed in my day to day life. I really like to observe people around me, especially in my college. I think it's very interesting because I'm always surrounded by different people because the university that I go to is quite large. So I thought I just needed to reflect on this idea that I had come to. But that wraps up things for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you for joining me today. Tune in every Thursday to listen or watch on YouTube or Spotify. And make sure to check out the Instagram or the TikTok. It's at findyourpower_podcast. Feel free to DM me through the Instagram as well if you would like or any questions you have. I will be doing an advice session soon, probably within the new year. Thank you again so much for tuning in. Please rate the podcast and feel free to leave any comments or reviews. And lastly, if you would like to be featured for an interview, you can send me an email at the email linked in the description of the podcast. And I will talk to you guys again soon. And don't forget, we will find your power.